Welcome to the Hype Life Podcast Experience, where we teach you what you won't learn in school. From careers to financial literacy, we give you the information you need to bridge your passion with your purpose. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our speaker for this evening, Frank Canace. Frank Canace is a longtime trial attorney, accountant, and retired police officer turned startup guru, business consultant, and author. He is a co-founder of a business and technology consulting firm, which assists businesses to reach their fullest potential through the implementation and use of best practices in the areas of technology, business, and law. Frank views his life as perfect and attributes much of his success to the utilization of visualization and manifestation. Frank firmly believes that you have full control over your life and has a teachable process to achieving a rich and full life. Frank is passionate about teaching others how to manifest their own perfect lives and live as he has, with a life empty of regret. Frank, welcome to HypeHuddles. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Frank, I want to dive right into this. You clearly have an extensive and impressive resume. Tell us a little bit about what you're currently up to, and we'll work backwards from there, more diving deeper into your life.
First of all, thanks for the great introduction. I appreciate that. Sounds very impressive when you say it. I do. I own a startup right now. I was a longtime trial attorney. I'm a retired police officer. I'm a lawyer. I'm an accountant. I want to say about 10 years ago, we started this startup. We're still in early stage growth of the startup, but it is my passion. I love it. I love everything about it. I love building things. I love my partners. I love the way we're able to reach out to smaller companies and help them along the growth path that most startups go through. We've made a lot of mistakes along the way. We try to help people by learning from our own mistakes. I do have a perfect life. It's great to be in control of a business that's growing exponentially every day.
You've done a lot. Your business is currently a startup. Have you always been interested in business and law? Take us back to your childhood. How did you kind of get to this point? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's a long road. It's a long kind of windy and twisty road. So I went to college. I majored in accounting. I got an accounting degree. Then I went to law school. My intention was to become an FBI agent. That's what I wanted to do. I got hired by the FBI. There was a 2-year hiring freeze, so they weren't hiring FBI agents. So they tabled me for 2 years. In the interim, the agent that hired me called me in and said, listen, if you go into the private sector, we're never going to get you back. You're going to be like a tax lawyer or something like that. We'll never get you back to law enforcement. New Haven, Connecticut is hiring 12 people for 2 years. Would you be interested? And I said, sure. I was young. I was right out of law school. I had a very young family. So I decided to apply for and eventually get a job with the New Haven Police Department. 2 years later, the FBI called me back and said, hey, listen, we got a spot for you. At that point, my wife was pregnant with our middle child, Trevor. And he said, we're probably either going to send you to Dallas or Guam. And that sounds really exciting until you have a job that you know where you're going to be every night, and you have a young family that you've got to uproot. So I talked to my wife and we decided that we were going to stay in Connecticut. So I talked to the police chief and I said, listen, here's the deal. I got hired by the FBI, but I really want to stay here. But if I stay here, I'd really like to be able to practice law. And he said, listen, you can practice law. I have no problem with that. Just promise me 2 things. Promise me you won't market your badge. You won't market the fact that you're a police officer and getting clients. And that if you stay here, you'll retire. And I shook his hand and I said, done, chief. I promise you both of those things. And I did. I practiced law during the day. I worked as a police officer at night. It was perfect. It was awesome. I taught at police academies in between all of that. And it really helped me grow as a person. And when I retired from being a police officer, I came home. My wife was waiting for me like she always did when I got home in the morning. And it was my last day. And she said, so how was it? And I said, so far, so perfect. And at that point, we started evaluating, like, why was our life so perfect? We knew so many people who would describe their life as mediocre, like I'm muddled in mediocrity. And we kind of examined it together and we started reading books together on the topic. And I decided, most of these books were written in the 1800s. They were so difficult to read. And I decided I was going to sit down and write this book, and I wrote the How to Create the Perfect Life, the step-by-step guide. And it was during all of that time that I was really examining everything. And I look back at my life, and we launched it on my 50th birthday. That was my goal. I'm going to launch this book on my 50th birthday. But I also had another goal that I was going to retire, at least semi-retire from my law practice on my 50th birthday and put all of my efforts into the startup. So the launching of the book and the startup kind of go hand in hand, and they're both very dear to me. So it's a long kind of twisty process as to how I got to where I am right now. But I've always had an interest in business. I majored in business. I had anticipated that once I got past my law enforcement career, I'd get into business. I just wasn't really sure how I was going to end up in business. And the business, the technology business, just kind of fell in my lap. And my business partner and I kind of put our head to the grindstone and figured we were going to make it work. And we have so far. It's been pretty good.
Wow. So it's really impressive. And I want to kind of even take it back even a little bit further, because I know we may have some students here who are interested in law, maybe police, maybe criminal justice. Can you tell us what it was like going into law school, and maybe where did you go to school? What was that experience like?
I went to Quinnipiac Law School, it was University of Bridgeport at the time. Law school was very difficult for me. I know I talk about it in my book, I talk about it in my podcast. I have dyslexia and I have dyscalculia. So I mix up letters and numbers. The numbers are much more worse. If you look at my phone bill at the end of the month, you'll see how many times I misdial phone numbers because I mess up numbers. So reading for me has always been very difficult. And then reducing what I've read to writing, which is exactly what law school is. You read something, you write it down. It's exactly what law school is. It was very difficult for me. But I can tell you that it was no more difficult than college was for me. My dyscalculia is much worse than my dyslexia. So being an accounting major was very difficult for me. So my life has been always adjusting to make myself able to perform when I needed to perform. So although law school was difficult, I had already geared myself to the process of making sure this works. So my first year law school is by far the most difficult. Huge number of writing assignments. They really load you down with classes, and it consumes your life. It's all consuming. You have time for nothing else other than law school. But again, I had gone through that in college. College was difficult for me. I had to really buckle down. So that process, that discipline, I had already put into place in college. So law school, what I would probably describe law school as a much more pleasurable experience than most people would, just because I had gone through it in college.
So once graduating from law school, you tell us about that. So you jumped into being a trial attorney and then decided you wanted to be a police officer. How did that come to be?
No, actually, I applied for the FBI while I was in law school. I got hired by the FBI while I was in law school, and there was that 2-year hiring freeze. During that time, I graduated from law school. I'd passed the bar exam, and the FBI told me there was this hiring freeze, so we can't hire you for 2 years. We anticipated it's going to be 2 years. They really didn't have an end date for me. So I had just figured I was going to go into private practice or work for an accounting firm or something like that. And that's when the call came about New Haven. We can get you into New Haven if you pass the test and pass all of the requirements. It's a 2-year job. After those 2 years, you can come to the FBI. So that's what I did for 2 years. I was exclusively a police officer. I was obviously a barred attorney. And it wasn't until I had that discussion with my chief when he said, yeah, we want you to practice law. We think it'd be good for the department as a whole, that I opened up my own law practice. From day one, I worked for myself from day one, kind of learned everything myself, that I opened up a litigation firm. And I enjoyed both careers very, very much.
Amazing. So what was that day to day like where you're kind of doing both when you were in the police, in the police department and also practicing law? What did that look like for you? How did you not burn out, or did you burn out?
So, and Paige can attest to this, and it's in the book. My life was exactly like this. I would work midnight. I would go into work at 11 o'clock. I would work until 7. I would come home. I would shower. I would go practice law till about 3 or 4 o'clock. I would come home, spend some time with the family. If the kids had a sporting event, I'd go to the sporting event. I would sneak in 2 hours sleep. I'd go to work. I'd start it all over again. It was daunting, no doubt about it. And I was tired a lot, and being tired is not fun, but I never really burned out because I loved both jobs. I really was passionate about both of them. And being a trial attorney made me a better cop. Being a cop made me a better trial attorney. Both worked so well hand in hand. I had the support of my family. I have an outstanding wife who took care of everything while I was working. The family kind of went off without a hitch. And I had great kids who didn't cause much trouble. So life was good. For those 20 years, what other people would describe as a grind was really pleasurable for me.
And so just to touch on more of the, I guess, the caseload that you had as an attorney, what was that like? What kind of clients did you represent? Tell us more about that.
I represented every kind of client. Anybody who was going to trial, I represented. So anything from criminal defendants to civil plaintiffs to corporations, whoever was going to trial, whoever needed a trial attorney, I was there. My caseload was huge. For 7 years, I handled more cases than any single attorney in the state of Connecticut. So my caseload was enormous, but I enjoyed it. I liked it. Like I said, I liked going to work. Of course, there were times where I was just dog tired and really had to force myself to get through it. But everything I learned during those 20 years of doing both jobs, I put in the book. I had to be extremely organized, unbelievably organized, or unbelievably disciplined. I had to really make sure that I had all of my ducks in a row, because I didn't have the luxury that other lawyers or other cops had. I didn't have 8 hours just kind of hanging around in my day that I could kind of get myself together before I went to court or work as a police officer. So I had to make sure all of my ducks were in a row all the time. And there was never any opportunity for me to slip. So that really helped me with my discipline.
Amazing. So one of the things that stuck out for me in your book, and I was reading it again today just to kind of refresh, and it was a quote by, I guess it was your partner at the time. He said, "Sometimes you need to do what you don't want to do in order to become who you want to become." And I thought that was really powerful. And I was wondering if you can kind of talk about that and the perception of, sometimes we think a job is going to be this, but it really turns out to be something else. Can you talk us through that moment for you?
Yeah, that's the Fighting Superman chapter. Is it appropriate for me to tell the story?
I think it's appropriate. Yeah.
Okay. I was working in New Haven, Connecticut, and it was, I think, the late 90s, early 2000s. And this drug Illy had taken over the streets of New Haven. And that was, in one shape or form, either marijuana or mint leaves dipped in embalming fluid or liquid PCP. Quite a mixture, right? So one of the symptoms of somebody who had taken Illy was they became very hot and very, very agitated. So it wasn't uncommon in the late 90s for us to get a call of a very, very agitated, naked man running down the street. And one day we got a call in one of the public housing complexes from a mother who said her son had just come home and he was naked and he ran upstairs and he was wrecking the upstairs bedroom. So my supervisor and I responded to the scene, and we could hear a lot of commotion on the second floor. And the mother said, "He's up there now. He's ruining the house. You need to get him out of here." And we knew what it was. We knew it was Illy. And we knew we had to get him medical treatment because it just wreaks havoc on your heart. That kind of stress just wreaks havoc on your heart. And the quicker we can get him medical attention, the better off, the quicker they can calm him down. So the mother didn't describe him to us. And I expected, a young man. And we walked up the stairs. It was a very small, narrow stairwell. And we opened the door and there was just this hulk of a human being standing there, naked and screaming at us. And I looked at my partner and he looked at me. That's not what we expected, right? She said, my son. She may have actually said my little boy at one point. So not at all we were expecting this huge individual who could probably have thrown us around if he wasn't on Illy, now on Illy. And we described fighting somebody on Illy like fighting Superman because they had this superhuman strength and we didn't want to hurt them. So trying to get somebody restrained while they're on Illy was very difficult. We couldn't put handcuffs on them. They would break our handcuffs. They would break flex ties. Those flex ties, they would break flex ties. So we would bring duct tape with us and we'd actually have to duct tape their hands together because that's the only thing they couldn't break. Well, before we can do any of that, we didn't have the duct tape with us or any of that stuff. This guy looked at us and turned around and jumped out the window, not through an open window, through a closed window. He dove through the glass. And, right. If you've never seen anything like that, I can't describe it. I can't describe the feeling that goes through your mind when somebody just dives out of a closed second-story window. And we ran to the window, my supervisor and I, and we looked down at the backyard, and it was just a backyard covered with litter. There was a lawnmower down there. It was just crazy. And this kid is face down on the ground. And I thought, oh my God, he just killed himself. And this rush of panic goes through your, like, I just saw somebody jump out of a window. And I didn't even get that I couldn't even verbalize that thought to my supervisor. And the guy stood up and looked at us and started screaming and ran away. I was shocked, completely shocked. So I looked at my partner. I'm like, what do we do now? No sooner did I get those words out of my mouth, and I hear somebody running up the stairs. This guy who had just jumped out of the window was now running upstairs. Now, I guess he was even more angry at us because he had jumped out of the window. And he came up to the second story, and he was just covered in blood, and it was nasty. But he came rushing at us. So we had to subdue him. We had to wrestle with him. We had to subdue him. And he was sweaty and bloody. And by the time we had gotten him restrained so that the AMR ambulance drivers could take him away from the scene, I was a mess. I was an absolute mess. So my gun belt was all turned around. I was covered in somebody else's blood. I had sweat all over me. I was a mess, right? I was sweating because we were fighting for so long. So I walked down to my car, and I'm sitting on my car, and my supervisor comes down. And I said to him, you know what, Sarge, this is not what I signed up for. And he looked at me, and he is one of my dear friends, and he is a person that I listen to all the time. He said, Frank, let me tell you something. This is exactly what you signed up for. He said, sometimes you got to do the things you don't want to do to become the person you want to become. I never forgot that. That is great advice for anybody. I go back to that fighting Superman story in my mind all the time, because I will tell you this right now. One of the things they never tell you when you're in a startup class, and I teach at an MBA program, startups, they never, ever tell you in these MBA programs for entrepreneurship that you're going to be a leader in your community. You're going to be a leader in whatever you do. And I was a leader in the legal practice. I was a leader as a police officer. My life was easy because it was kind of an overdrive because I had gone through the tough process. But when you start a startup, you start from ground zero, and you've got to do all of the grunt work, right? And if you're not willing to put your ego aside and do all of that work, to do the things you necessarily don't want to do, to build what you want to build, you're going to fail. It's probably one of the harshest realities of startups. You're financially secure in your life because you've gotten to that point, but your startup isn't. You have become a leader in your community, but in your startup and in the startup community or in the industry that you're working on, you're kind of a peon, right? Because you're so little compared to all of these big companies that are established. And it's a very harsh reality that I came from being this leader, this guy who was really great at what I did and somebody that everybody recognizes being good, to being this small startup in this huge world of other businesses that want to put us down. So I go back to that fighting Superman story all the time. It's probably the most valuable lesson I've ever learned, or one of them.
Yeah, it's a pretty powerful story. And I think it's a great lesson for us to all remember in anything we do, even thinking about college. You have to, sometimes you got to study all night just to, pass an exam the next morning. And if you don't study all night, you're probably not going to pass, or these simple, mundane things throughout our day that we don't realize add up to success in the short and sometimes long term.
Yeah, I talk about that in the book. I talk about, if you're not willing to do that, you're just a castle builder. You're just building these castles in the sky in your mind. I say it in the book, you've got to fill your cup up every day. Every single day, you've got to bring it. Every day, you got to rise and grind. You got to do everything you need to do to be successful. And sometimes those are going to be things you don't want to do, or things that aren't pleasant, or things that aren't glamorous. But there are things that you need to do to get to where you want to go.
Yeah. So it seems like you have a very strong mindset and a positive mindset. Has it always been this way? And how important is that mindset when you take on anything in life? Because I know that that's a big part of your philosophy is having a positive mindset.
Yeah. And I share this in the book, and there's nothing more cathartic than writing a book about yourself from kind of day one through the whole process. I was not always as positive. I was not, and I tell this to people all the time, in my 40s, I wasn't a very nice person. You probably wouldn't have liked me. And it wasn't until I had a conversation with my wife where we were sitting at dinner. I probably said something snide, I forget. I used to say that all the time. And she said, you know what? You've completely lost your humanity. And that was one of the times that I thought, you know what? I really have to kind of check myself and start figuring out what I'm going to do. And one of the best ways to put yourself in a great mindset is just laundry list things you're grateful for. You know, I talk about gratitude a lot, and it's kind of a word, and it's a popular word now that everybody uses. And I'm not sure everybody really understands what gratitude is. You know, I'm listening to everybody on this call. Whose advice do you listen to more than anybody else's? I'm going to tell you the true answer to that. But everybody's got somebody in their life on this call that they trust who gives them great advice. Number one on your gratitude list. That's got to be number one, right? And then all of the other things, right? Once you laundry list the things that you're grateful for, if that doesn't put you in a good mood, I don't know what will. And that's what I really started to do. I started to focus on all of the great things. I have a great family. I've got a great wife. We've got a great life. I have jobs. I've had jobs. I have a job that I love. We go to nice places. We live a good life. All of those things I repeatedly remind myself of. And I will tell people all the time, if you don't have a positive outlook, and I slip all the time. My wife will tell you that I slip into negative all the time. I got to talk myself out of it. And we'll talk about that later too. I just kind of laundry list everything that I'm grateful for. I have it on my phone. I have, on one of my notes, I have a gratitude list, and it's huge. Every time something happens, like I went to Walmart and I got first in line. I'm grateful for that. That's great. You got to be grateful for that. Why wouldn't you, right? That's a good thing that happened in your life. And it may seem minuscule and insignificant, but be happy about it. That's one more thing in your life to be happy about. So I am constantly adding to that. I'm constantly saying thank you. Thank you to myself. I think people, now it's the mask is on when I'm at Walmart so nobody can hear me. But I think people were probably looking at me going, who's he talking to? I don't really care about that. I talk to myself all the time, and we'll go through that later on too. But I wasn't always positive. I've kind of talked myself into being positive, and now it's become a learned trait.
So like you just mentioned, going back towards that original icebreaker question, I'm dying to know, who is the person that whose advice do you ask, or who do you seek?
So the question is, whose advice do you listen to more than anybody else's, right? And it's a loaded question. And I cheated, and I start all of my speaking sessions, whether I'm talking to cops or people in a class, with that exact question. You listen to your own advice more than anybody else's. And I want you to think about it, right? You're crossing a street. Everybody who's ever been close to you has always told you, look both ways before you cross the street, right? But when you're crossing the street, whose advice are you listening to? You've got to listen to your own advice, because I've done it. I can make it. And yeah, end up running in front of, I just took bad advice for myself, right? That's stupid advice. When I wait for the light for me to walk across the crosswalk, that's good advice. I'm giving that to myself. And you can't hold anybody else responsible for the bad things that happen in your life, because you are the final say in it. And once that goes both ways, right? That's a double-edged sword. You're responsible for your life. I say it all the time. You're responsible for all of the good things that happen in your life, but you're probably responsible for a lot of the bad things that happen in your life too, just because of your mindset, right? There are things outside of your control, right? But you ultimately have the opportunity to change all of that. And sometimes it takes time, right? Sometimes you have to grow into that. Sometimes you have to establish yourself. Sometimes you have to take the little steps, right? Doing the things you don't want to do, right? I talk about this all the time. This is the example I use because it's outlandish, but it drives home the point. If I want to be an astronaut and I'm 14 years old, saying I want to be an astronaut tomorrow is unrealistic. I got to go to high school. I got to go to college. I may not like school. I may not like college. I just want to fly a space shuttle. That's all I want to do. Then you're probably going to have to go to flight school, military, right? That's discipline. You're probably not going to like that, but it's a step you need to take, right? So you are responsible for all of the decisions you ultimately make in your life, and you're responsible for the path it takes. And I talk about self-awareness all the time. One of the things I've been blessed with is I am very, very quick to say I made a mistake. If not to everybody else, I say it to myself. I'll admit it to myself very quickly. Like, Frank, you messed up on that. And that's not always easy for us to do. But if I'm going to believe I'm responsible for all of the good things in my life, I have to take responsibility for the bad things too. And that's kind of a balancing act, right? You've got to work on that. You've got to really take responsibility for the things that are in your control that have gone bad for you. So I haven't always been that positive. I listen to myself. I have a lot of people who give me good advice. Ultimately, though, the advice I listen to more than anybody else's is my own, because when you come right down to it, whose voice do you hear more than anybody else's? Your own. It's in your head. You hear yourself talking to people. It's going all the time, sometimes in the conscious mind, sometimes in the subconscious mind, but your voice is always going in your head. So if you're not giving yourself good advice, then things are going to spiral out of control quickly.
That's really great perspective. That's really great advice. And I would love for you to dive more into that, in terms of just the process that you have. But before you do, I wanted to take a moment to see if we had any questions from our students. The floor is open in this moment. If anyone has any questions for Frank, you can go ahead and signal yourself by clicking the wave button. Yes.
Sweet.
Hannah, go ahead, Hannah.
Hi. So, was there like any times in your job where like your morals and like your job interfered or conflicted with each other?
My morals were always very well aligned with being a police officer. Like I said, I was a lawyer first. I have a passion for the law. I always tried to do the right thing as a police officer, the legal thing, the moral thing. My morals always lined up very, very well with being a police officer. And I will say, listen, I know that right now we see a lot of bad stuff from cops. I think that's the case for most police officers. When you take into account that there are 750,000 police officers in the country, and there's probably 3 or 4 million interactions with the public on a daily basis, and we see what we see from such a small minority, it's horrible. It needs to be corrected. It needs to be fixed. But I think for the most part, most people's morals are aligned with what they should do as a police officer. I ask a question when I talk, and I used to teach this class on use of force with police officers. And I said, listen, whether you're Catholic or not, give me one of the 10 commandments. And everybody says, thou shalt not kill, because that's what we're programmed with. Like, we should be good people. We shouldn't hurt each other. We should really try to take care of each other. That's what we're taught for the most part. And there are people who go off the tracks on that. Absolutely. And we see it, and we see it, and we should see it, and we should deal with it quickly. But I never had a problem with my morals conflicting. I worked with a large group of people that I trusted, who I never saw their morals conflicted with the job they had to do. But I know it's out there, and I know it's troubling, and I know it needs to be dealt with.
Great question, Hannah. I think we have a question in the chat. The question is, how did you decide what you wanted to do in life? Did you know from the beginning? Thank you. Great question, Isha.
That is a good question. That's a great question. Boy, it's hard for me to pinpoint when I decide. I knew I always wanted to go to law school. I always wanted to be a lawyer. My mom tells me that. My mom says, you always wanted to be a lawyer, ever since I was a young child. When did the FBI become my immediate goal as a college student? I don't know. It's hard for me to tell you the exact time that happened. I know that I majored in accounting because I wanted to be an FBI agent. So it must have happened sometime either early in college or late in high school. But it's hard for me to tell you the exact time that I decided FBI was going to be where I wanted to go before I got sidetracked.
Any other questions? Natalia. Oh, sorry, Kim.
No. Go ahead.
Natalia, you have a question?
Yes. I wanted to ask about law school. So when you went to law school, did you have to pick like a specific major in law school, like criminal justice or like different things like that? Like just different things, or did you go just generally for a lawyer?
That's a really good question. I get that question a lot. So law school is a little different than college. College, you have to pick a major and you concentrate on something that you hopefully want to do the rest of your life. Law school is a little different. You have all of these core classes that you have to take, and you don't have a major, but you have a lot of electives that you can take. And for me, all of the electives that I took were all in taxation and business, mostly because I just felt comfortable with those classes because I had been a business and accounting major. But there's no major specific in law school. You graduate with a law degree and it's just a law degree.
Kim, did you have a question?
I did. In our school, social emotional learning is a very big topic, and it's something that we try to address with all of our students, mental health issues. My father is a retired NYPD officer, and I know that, he worked in various units. He worked in homicide and narcotics, and he was in the Harbor Patrol. And I know for him, it was really difficult to practice self-care and to be able to separate your obligations and then your private life. So, and this is something for our students as well, to be able to take care of themselves, to do your job with integrity, but to make sure that you have that balance. And I guess I just was curious because I listened to your sleep schedule and I think, how did you do it all? And you seem to have done it so well. If you have any advice for these future professionals and also just students at this time who need to learn to kind of navigate that. So for you as a professional, but also for our students, what's your advice for self-care?
So I think you have to draw a line. And however you draw that line, you have to draw it. For me, it was very simple. And I guess just because I worked as a cop at night and as a lawyer during the day, when I came home from working as a police officer, I took off my uniform, I put on a suit. And to me, that was a break in my day. That was a break in, I was able to compartmentalize what I had seen the night before, what I had done the night before, and move on very quickly because I needed to move on very quickly to the next portion of my day or days. And for me, the line was taking off my uniform, putting on a suit. And I know that I talk to a lot of people who have similar lines, and it may not be the way they dress or what they do. It may just be something as simple as when you get done with something, taking 5 minutes, listening to music, listening to a song, having a theme song, doing whatever it takes to break off what you've done and what you're going to do. My wife is a yoga instructor. We talk about this all the time. We're really into mindfulness now. And it's so easy to look at your life as like one continuous line. And if you don't break up that line, it gets very, very difficult. You kind of get consumed by your life, right? And yoga instructors have this term, they say living in the gap. Like there's a lot of little gaps in your life that you miss because you're just kind of running down that line. Like from being a cop to being a lawyer, to being a cop, to being a lawyer, raising kids, putting them through school, weddings, all that stuff. And if you don't take time to enjoy those little gaps in the day, like little breaks, natural breaks, I think you're gonna get taken over by your world. And I was able to do that just because my schedule made me do that. But I think there are opportunities. I do it now. Even during the pandemic, I kept my schedule. I got up at the same time I would normally get up. And for me, it's really easy. I get up, I work out, and then I take a shower, I put my suit on. And then at 5 o'clock, I take my suit off and I'm done. I'm done with work. Now I may have to answer emails or text messages or phone calls, but it's a different feel for me when I'm not sitting at my desk in my suit. So for me, I just kind of changed the mindset that I'm in, even though I may be doing the same work. I change the way I'm looking at it. Like this is my 9 to 5, and then this is after hours work. And it's worked for me. I'm able to see those little gaps in my day and enjoy them a lot more than I would. But I'll tell you, earlier in my adulthood, it was difficult because you're on that hamster wheel and you just want to grind, right? You have so many goals and so many expectations out of life, and you just want to go get it. And the best advice I would give to young people is you're going to get there if you work hard, but enjoy those little gaps in life because that's where all the good stuff is.
That's great advice. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Oh,
Okay.
there you go. Yeah. I was muted. Any other questions for Frank? Frank has an activity prepared. I think he's going to walk us through an activity. And not that I know he's going to walk us through an activity. But before we do that, does anyone else have any final questions while we have the floor open?
I just had one question for Frank. I mean, you definitely seem to be an adventurous type of person, a real risk taker in your professional life. And I was just wondering about, as you were growing up, do you think those were just some innate qualities that you had as a young person? Or do you think it was a blend of like nurturing in the family that you grew up in? Because I think a lot of people, I don't consider myself a risk taker. I like a little bit more security in my life. And I mean, you were juggling, as Kim said, juggling so many different balls in your life. So I'm just wondering about nature versus nurture, or a combination.
So it was definitely, I think it was a combination of both. I grew up on a farm in New Jersey. I know a lot of you are from New Jersey, and there are farms in Jersey. Western Jersey, I grew up on a farm, which was a great place to grow up. But we always had this motto: it's a great place to grow up, it's an even better place to leave. So when I left the farm life, and I grew up working really hard, I had some very, very difficult jobs. So nothing I ever did in my adult life was nearly as difficult as what I did during my high school jobs, or even some of my early college jobs when I was living in Phillipsburg. So when I got away from that area, I just wanted to see everything, right? Because I was in this cultural void for so long, and I just wanted to see everything. So I went to college and I just took it all in. And I don't think I ever lost that sense of adventure, in that I just wasn't exposed to anything as a young person. So I just wanted to see as much as I could see. And I didn't want to waste a second of my life. And I've always felt that way, like, can't waste a second. This is like important. I got to get this done. So I don't want to waste any time in my life. And I enjoyed being a cop. I enjoyed being a lawyer. I enjoy the startup. And I've always been the kind of person that will take a chance just because they call it what? FOMO now, fear of missing out. I just don't want to miss out. Like, I don't want to miss out on something. And when I'm done working and doing everything, I want to feel like I've at least tried everything I wanted to try, and at least gave it my best effort. Because if you don't do that, I mean, like, what's the sense of living life, right? If you're not going to give it a shot, if you're not going to go for it when you see something that you want, it just seems kind of empty to me.
Well, thank you for that question, Carmel. I think that's it for our time as far as questions. So, Frank, I want to leave the floor to you to kind of run us through what you have planned.
So this is a visualization exercise. I think visualization is so important. I go through it in my book. We think in pictures, right? And I preach to people, like, don't think in terms, or don't tell yourself don't say not, don't say won't, right? Those words, those negative words, I think they make up like 18% of our English language, which is huge. That's a huge portion of our English language, like qualifiers, right? So I tell people, like, visualization is important. Imagine you go to a refrigerator and you pour a little bit too much water into a cup and it's at the brim. We've all done that, right? And you're like, oh no, what do I do now? I'm going to spill it on the floor. And you turn around and you look at the kitchen sink. You're probably walking to the kitchen sink going, don't spill, don't spill, don't spill, don't spill, right? Well, your mind doesn't know don't. Your mind is thinking in pictures, right? I'll give you an example. Everybody, just give me 5 seconds. For the next 5 seconds, don't think about a dog. Go. All right, done. Who didn't think about a dog? Every once in a while, I'll have somebody will say, I didn't, Frank, I thought about a cat. Good, now you're thinking the right way, right? Don't think about don't spill. Think about a full cup, because your mind only thinks in pictures. And there's no picture for don't. So if you say don't spill, don't spill, don't spill, all your mind sees is spill, 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 spill. And that's exactly what you're going to do, right? So like, you'll hear like sports coaches say, if you're afraid of making a mistake, you're going to make a mistake. Yeah, like, don't miss this fly ball. All your mind sees is the ball flying by you. And you're at some point, your mind's going to take over and make your body do exactly what your mind sees you doing. You're going to miss the fly ball. So as we picture our lives, as we picture what we want to picture, I want you to be very positive, and I don't want you to think about the don'ts. I want you to think about the positive act, the full cup, not the don't spill, the cat, not the dog, right? Because when you say don't think about something or don't do something, all your mind sees is the act that you don't want to do. It doesn't have a picture for don't. So we're going to go through an exercise, and it's going to be quick because I know we don't have a lot of time, but the key to this thing is using all 5 of your senses, because we almost never visualize using all 5 of our senses, right? So we won't go through this in depth because it takes a while, and I do this with some of the people that I was coaching. So let's imagine your dream car, right? Everybody's got an idea of a dream car that they want. I want you to just imagine it. See what it looks like. Now, that's your vision. That's visual, right? I want you to look at it not from the outside, because that's somebody else's car. I want you to look at it from the inside. And if you want to picture yourself in the car, imagine yourself driving downtown and you see yourself in a plate glass window, you see a reflection of yourself driving your dream car. That's you in it. That's your car. You own it. Now, I want you to use your hearing sense. What's it sound like? If it's a sports car, it's going to have a rev. If it's a luxury car, it might be smooth. If it's an electric car, it's going to have no sound. But you're going to hear things around you, the blinker going, the radio. All of that stuff's important. I want you to hear what your car is going to, your dream car, what it's going to sound like. The smell. Smell is kind of easy, right? Off the bat. New car smell. We all know what that smells like. It's a great smell, right? But there are other smells. You put the air on or the heat on. You can smell that when you first turn it on. Right? Maybe you smell the leather on the steering wheel. Maybe you just armor all it. You can smell that. Maybe you got one of those fragrance trees. Maybe you can smell that. The feel. What does it feel like to sink into your dream car? Just think about that nice, big, soft seat. You're just sinking into it. Your hands on that beautiful steering wheel. The gear shift. Maybe it's metal, maybe it's wood. I don't know, but it's beautiful, right? It's perfect. It feels so good under your hand. Now, here's the tough one. Taste. What's the taste of a car? Well, I don't know. If you're like me, you probably eat in your car because we're all going 1,000,000 miles an hour, right? So you're going to end up eating in your car. So I don't know if it's McDonald's, if it's a fast food restaurant, if it's Dunkin' Donuts, wherever. But I want you to picture driving up through that drive-through, rolling down the window, ordering medium hot coffee, black. Okay, that'll be $2.12. Drive up. I drive up. As I drive past the first window, I see myself in the car, in the window, the reflection in the window. Then I pull up and I get the coffee. I reach out of my beautiful car and get my coffee. I'm careful because it's my beautiful car. I put it in the cup holder. I can smell the aroma of the coffee. And I drive out, gear shift, steering wheel, all of that stuff. And then I take a sip of the coffee. That's all 5 senses. And that's how you visualize what you want. You've got to use all of your senses to visualize what you want. And we don't do that all the time, mostly because we just kind of have a picture of what we want and we think we're going to get that. So quick example. Hilton wanted to buy a beautiful hotel when it was just a smaller Hilton in the very beginning, wanted to buy a beautiful hotel. He had a picture of the hotel under his blotter. He had a glass blotter on his desk, but he did more than that. He went into the hotel and noticed the smells of the hotel. What did it smell like? He got a room and he laid on the bed. He ran his hands across the tables in the lobby. He listened to the bell and the bellboy coming. He listened to and watched the circular door going, the revolving door going around. He listened to the cabs outside. 3 years later, he bought that hotel, the Waldorf Astoria. So visualization's powerful. Vision boards are powerful, but I don't want you just to rely on vision boards because vision boards are just sight. And if you're not putting yourself into that, whatever you want, living it from your perspective, right? You should never see yourself in a visualization exercise. You should never see your face unless you're looking in a mirror in a visualization exercise. I'm in my car. I don't see myself unless I look in the rearview mirror. Maybe I see my eyes or I see my hand on the steering wheel. That's what it should look like. This is you training your mind to live the life you want, to expect the life you want. And that, if you go through that visualization exercise for everything you want, you're going to get what you want. So that's my secret to visualization.
Really enjoyed that visualization exercise, Frank. I know that for me, actually, I only focus on the picture, and that is a very helpful way to kind of bring things together using the five senses. And I know you have an excellent example. You just gave us an excellent example with the hotel. But I was wondering if you could really drive it home with our wide herb story, because I think that this example is a really true embodiment of how that visualization really plays out in your life. Is that
so you want me to
something
tell?
Is that
You want? I'll
that's
tell
something-
the story if you think it's appropriate. I will tell the story.
I think it's appropriate. It's in your book, and I'm hoping that it actually resonates with some of our students.
When I first wanted to become a police officer, when I was first applying to the police job, everybody wanted to buy me a book on police officers and police officers' lives. And it was always books on how things went horribly wrong for police officers. And I thought to myself, even before I got into this whole visualization and expectation and things like that, I knew that's just wrong. Like, I can't have that picture in my mind of what policing is going to be, because there were just, situations where things went horribly wrong for police officers. So I went to a library, and those are ancient buildings where they have books. So I went to the library and I got a book on Wyatt Earp, and I started reading it. And, I didn't even know Wyatt Earp was a real person growing up. You hear Wyatt Earp, but you think, he's just some kind of fictional character. And I started reading about Wyatt Earp, and Wyatt Earp had a really strong mindset. He knew every time he went into a situation, he was going to be okay. And he got in some really, really bad situations, one being shootout at the OK Corral. And shootout at the OK Corral was not what we think. I always pictured it as being this huge, corral, and people like 100 yards from each other shooting at each other. It wasn't. These people were like 15 feet from each other, shooting at each other. And just about everybody died or was seriously injured except for Wyatt Earp. He didn't even get shot. He didn't even get grazed by a bullet. And his entire law enforcement career, he went without ever getting shot, which was very rare in the Old West for law enforcement people never getting shot. So I decided that was going to be my mantra. Every time I started my shift as a police officer, I said, I'm Wyatt Earp. I'm Wyatt Earp. I'm Wyatt Earp. And one night we were investigating a domestic dispute, and it was in public housing. And I walked up to the door with my partner, and behind us was a cyclone fence. That's one of those, they're just those metal fences. It's like all air and just like those little wires, right? And while we were taking the complaint, I heard somebody behind us scream, and I turned around. And before I can even react, I saw a muzzle flash. Somebody was shooting at me. And I didn't have time to draw my gun or any of that stuff. Like, that's TV stuff. This happens very quickly. But I did have time in my mind to say, I'm Wyatt Earp. I closed my eyes and said, I'm Wyatt Earp. And I counted the bullets. I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shots. And I opened my eyes when this firing stopped, and the kid who was shooting at me looked at me, and I looked at him, and he was on the other side of the fence, and he started running. So I started running down the side of the fence, trying to chase him, but there's a fence between us. So I went as far as I could. And finally I stopped, and I went back to the scene. And by that point, all the police officers were there. And I told them the story of what happened. And I said, he shot 5 times at me. My partner confirmed, shot 5 times at Frank. He was right there, 15 feet, same distance as the OK Corral. We measured it. And they said, so we can't find any bullets. Are you sure this really happened? They thought I was crazy. So I said, yeah, listen, this happened. My partner heard it. The complainant I was taking a domestic complaint on, everybody heard this. This happened. I saw the kid shooting at me. Well, our Bureau of Identification unit came out, and they counted 5 bullets had hit the cyclone fence. All 5 of the rounds he shot. Now, listen, I don't know a lot about fences, but I know it's mostly air. So for 5 bullets to hit those little wires and catch those bullets so it didn't get me is me manifesting me being Wyatt Earp. Believe what you want to believe. I know that day that I got through that because I was Wyatt Earp, I tell that story to every police department that I teach. And I went into an academy class one day. I'm like, you guys have to have a mantra. Everybody needs to have a mantra. So the next day I came in and they said, hey, we decided that our mantra is going to be we're Wyatt Earp. I said, it doesn't work. It doesn't work like that for you. Your mantra, the visualization you have has got to be deeply personal to you. So if Wyatt Earp becomes deeply personal to you, if you really believe that, then take it. I don't have a monopoly and I'm Wyatt Earp. But you've got to come to some kind of understanding with your brain as to how you're going to manifest things, what you believe, what you think is realistic. And you need to have hard set goals. And I have rules for goals. Like, people just kind of throw goals out there. I have hard set rules for goals so that you can achieve them. And I just kind of do it stepping stone wise, like smaller goals to larger goals to bigger goals, right? That's the way it goes. And that's kind of the way I did it in my life. And I think it culminated, and I could say the startup's great, the law practice is great. Man, it culminated that day when I was Wyatt Earp and 5 bullets got caught by that fence, because none of this would be happening right now if I wasn't Wyatt Earp that day. So that's my manifestation visualization story.
Really appreciate you sharing that. Just had to throw that in there because I know that really brings it home, at least for me, understanding the visualization and how it plays out in your life. And I think that's a great example. So this is the part of our HypeHuddle where we're going to ask you 5 final questions. Andrew's going to go ahead and ask you 5 final questions, Frank. So if you don't mind, I'm going to pass it over to Andrew.
All right, we'll hop right into the final 5.
Okay.
First question is, if you could speak to your high school self today, what is one piece of advice that you would give yourself?
Visualization.
It's that easy.
It's that easy.
Number 2, what's your favorite book and why?
Oh boy, I think, not counting mine, right? Because my publisher would be disappointed if I didn't say mine. My favorite book is The Upstarts, because like we talked about, everybody sees Airbnb and Uber as these colossal businesses. If you read The Upstarts, you see that those people who started those companies had to do the things they didn't want to do to become the people they wanted to become. If you need a harsh reminder of that, read Upstarts. It is a very, very descriptive book about how those 2 companies started and the things that the founders of those companies had to do to keep those companies afloat.
Third question, what is a common trait that you notice in those people who succeeded in your field?
I would say confidence. I would see self-assuredness and confidence, trusting themselves.
Number 4, what are some of your hobbies?
I like sports. So, golf, tennis, I run, really into yoga and Pilates now. That's a big thing. The business, I think, and that's another great thing about my business is I enjoy doing it. It's not just work for me. So I'll just read articles on the business just for kicks at night, just to pass some time.
And the final question is, what gets you hyped?
HypeHuddles? No, I think I'm hyped on life. I think I really love my life the way it is right now, the way it's going. And I am excited. This is another thing, another great exercise. I truly believe this now. I get up every morning and I look at myself in the mirror and I say something great, Frank. I always address myself as Frank because that's another topic for another day, but it's a very, very important. Frank, something great's going to happen to you today. And something does every day. So I'm not lying to myself.
Thank you. Send it back to Will.
Well, Frank, we really appreciate you coming out in the HypeHuddle and sharing all these valuable insights. I know we could have talked for, another hour and have a ton more questions, I'm sure. But, and yeah, we look forward to staying connected and hopefully getting your book out to some of these students so they can read it. Where can they find your book? Is it on Amazon?
So it's on Amazon. It's anywhere you buy books. It's on Barnes and Noble. It's on Amazon. So if you just kind of Google it, it's a Fulton publication. and it's an Ingram distribution, so you can find it anywhere. But the quickest way is to go on Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Frank, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
You too. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Hype Light Podcast Experience. If you like this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest episodes.